Well, we have no shortage of things to discuss on the weather front here this week, not only in the U.S. with snow and blizzards, but in South America as well, as we continue to watch rains in Brazil and Argentina. Here to give us the latest details, Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist with Nutrient Ag Solutions, joins us on the program. And Eric, good to talk with you again. Hope you had a great weekend. Let's jump down to South America first. I want to save the snow for later in our discussion. Watching Brazil and Argentina, I know a lot of folks keeping a close eye on it. Looks like they've been getting some decent rains, especially parts of central Brazil. So let's start there. What's the latest going on in South America?
Right. So after 3 months of drought with episodes of heat, we saw the last 7 to 10 days finally bring in some pretty decent rains to north central Brazil. So, like Mato Grosso, all the way over to the eastern side of Brazil. Now, will it undo months of damage? I don't think so. In fact, if I do a historical analysis looking at yield from CONAB and comparing it to similar weather scenarios, we would estimate that north central growing area, including Mato Grosso, could be off by 10 to 15% in terms of yield production. I've averaged for the whole country. My literally just my average state by state is 12% off of normal yield. But we have questions as to whether or not parts of Cordoba can make up, or excuse me, parts of Argentina can make up for some of those deficits. And I said Cordoba on accident there because over the weekend I was watching Cordoba specifically. That's a province in Argentina, because some places right around their capital called Cordoba as well picked up a foot of rain. I mean, a foot of rain
Mm,
over the
wow.
weekend, incredibly heavy. You may have seen it on social media, some of the flooding there. So now we've kind of flipped the script in parts of Argentina where there's been too much rain, potentially causing some problems. So here's what I'm concerned about. North central Brazil has another week where there's decent moisture. It's not heavy rain, but there's decent moisture coming through. We then see a slowdown into the third week of January. Right now, though, every long range forecast I have access to, and it makes sense meteorologically, we expect it to go back over to a wetter episode at the end of this month and the beginning of February. And to be honest, that's not what they want. That is the time period we need the monsoon to back off, bring in drier conditions so that they can harvest what crop is there and quickly plant safrina. As I see it, if the wet weather does verify at the very end of the month, beginning of February, we're going to be putting on heavy. It's like us getting heavy rains in September and October. We don't want it then. We want the crop to dry
Hmm.
down. We want smooth harvest. And so this is going to be just kind of another punch in the mouth to this Brazilian crop. So will we see a weather premium built into the markets based upon this? Be honest with you, Jesse, after talking with a lot of great ag economists, it seems to be something where everyone's going to have to start announcing that this crop is not just sub 150, but maybe even lower than that. If it does, it may finally unhinge the trap and get things moving in terms of soybean prices with a weather issue, which you and I've been talking about now for 3 months. So I think it's going to be something that continues to need to be monitored. And wet weather now, remember, is not ideal. So that's what I got for
Yeah,
South America.
I'm going to say TBD, I think, for South America on some of that stuff here. We'll watch over the next couple of weeks ahead. And I know you and I will continue talking about it for sure. Something else we've talked about has been how dry it is in the U.S. here this winter. It's been pretty mild. We haven't seen a lot of big storms. Well, that's changing in a big way here to start off the week. And I found this interesting. We have blizzard warnings, winter storm warnings stretching all the way from Kansas up through Nebraska and Iowa, etc. Did I see this right? A blizzard warning in Seattle too,
Yeah,
Eric? So what's going on with
yeah.
US weather here this week?
Well, very close to Seattle. It was kind of fun to just watch this. So the last time that the National Weather Service out of Seattle issued a blizzard warning for any of their territory, which does include parts of the Cascade Mountains and the Olympic Mountains, was 11 years ago. So this is
Wow.
there's people that work there now that have never done this, and so they just got their first taste of it. Yeah, it's east to west. The whole country is got our all hazards weather map is very colorful. You will either deal with severe weather and flooding, you will deal with strong straight line winds, or you'll deal with heavy snow. But the only spots in the country that are going to miss out on this are going to be pockets of the northern plains and the southwest. Those are just two areas I think that are going to miss out on all the flow. Nearly everywhere else is going to see it. So how much snow are we going to get? So it's going to come out of parts of New Mexico and Colorado. The panhandle's getting into Kansas. We're expecting from that area all the way to Michigan to be a pretty good stripe of 6 to 12 inches of snow. It's going to be probably hardest coming through parts of Iowa, parts of northern Illinois, into southern Wisconsin, eventually into Michigan, with heavy snows on the backside of this in Nebraska and Kansas. Now, remember, this is just system number one. This same system is going to put rain down on top of where the snow fell over the weekend in parts of New England, causing a flooding problem there. And then we have system two that follows it this upcoming weekend. It's going to go a little bit farther to the south. And then there's system three, which comes midweek next week, which even goes farther to the south of that. So unlike a year ago where we couldn't buy a snowflake in the midsection of the country, it was all up in the northern plains or all in the upper Midwest or all out west, we're finally getting some action here with snow. And so this is going to be a week where we really transform the landscape. And the good news about this is those soils aren't frozen. There's no what we call antecedent cold air, no preceding cold air, which means a lot of this is going to soak in and work against these long-standing drought issues. I love everything about this pattern, even though it's going to be very disruptive to our lives. When it comes to agriculture, we will look in March, April, May of next year and come back and say, man, I'm so glad January punched us in the mouth, because it's the kind of thing that comes through and starts to deliver the beginning of the end of these drought episodes we've been dealing with.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, it might not be something that is necessarily seen right now, but with those soils not frozen, hopefully eventually some of this moisture can make its way into this soil, can help out everything, all of our subsoil moisture, eventually maybe the river systems as well, potentially, or at least this is getting us a start, right? This is going to help us out, as you said, kind of in a big way here for this spring, isn't it?
It is. And remember, there's another part to this. So I said it starts off mild, but then it comes in with brutally cold air by the end of the week. In fact,
Yeah.
and looking at Montana, Montana is going to start off with highs in the mid 40s today and then finish with highs, not lows, but highs around -8 to -10 by the time we get to the end of the week. And the colder that's coming across the country after this week, okay, so after this week is going to get all the way into the south and southeast, where early this week we start up with two days of severe weather. One over the Gulf Coast today. Tomorrow it's going to be moving farther to the east over parts of the southeast, like from Florida to North Carolina. Well, we're going to have such cold air that's going to get all the way into Florida. I imagine we're going to get back into that. You ever seen the warnings about the freezing iguanas, the falling iguana
Mhm.
forecast? I think we're going to be getting some of that by the time this cold air penetrates pretty far to the south. But your comment was about later, and I agree. This is this kind of thing we need to see. And to be honest, Jesse, some of the new long range forecasts for spring are actually showing pretty tight windows given wet conditions being forecast as El Nino, which is at its peak, begins to fade. But you and I will have months to talk about that. I just want to put a bug in folks' ears that this pattern can stay active for quite some time, getting us all the way to maybe even March, April, and May.
Anything else on the U.S. weather here this week you want folks to just remember or reiterate to them? Like you said, this is the first of a couple different systems moving through. So, anything else you would say in terms of the U.S. weather here the next week or so?
Yeah, it's not set like this forever. Okay, we're going to deal with it for 10 to 15 days. And then I do expect the pattern to go back toward what I would just say a bit more El Nino-y, which is what we saw in December. But I think the roller coaster ride has now been kicked into higher gear, which means we're going to not just get stuck for long periods of time in either very mild and dry or very cold and wet setup. It's going to be fluctuating quite a bit. And just because you mentioned that, I do want to just go somewhere else real quick around the world, Australia. So this El Nino has not been typical for Australians. They're now getting another round of very wet weather to the east. They prepare for massive drought every time someone like me says El Nino. And we've been telling them, hey, it's not your typical El Nino flavor. And that's key because we're going to watch this El Nino, which is peaked now, crash over the next 6 to 7 months.
Well, good stuff as always. Folks can find more ag-wx.com. They can sign up for your weekly weather newsletter and get a look at the latest forecast for their area, ag-wx.com. Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Always good to chat with you, Eric. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, see you then.